Welcome back to another episode of Breaking Schemas here at the Raw School of Business, University of Michigan. And we have with us another leader in best, a distinguished guest. And this was a special one for me. For those who know, you know, this is a special one for me. We are welcoming to the room, to the pod, my dear friend, my brother, my co-founder, my partner, I love this guy. Please help me welcome Mr. Mike Muse to the room. Mike.
Yo.
How are you?
What's up, everybody? I'm so excited to be here with you, Marcus, and you as well, John. Marcus, we go back to Boys State.
Boys State.
American Legion Boys State. And here we are, still intersecting with each other. And I wouldn't have life any other way. It's been amazing going this life journey with you. I love you, twin, brother, all. So,
now, here's the crazy part. In 2 years come this summer, we would have known each other for 30 years. Let that sink in for a moment.
God, you and these numbers. I'm just like, I'm like, let me go get some kills, right? Let me go get some more kills. I need more.
Okay. All right. So
water.
So there's so many hyphens when it comes to describing you. There is the co-founder of a record label, Muse Recordings. There's the founder and CEO of LawChamps. There's TV personality as a correspondent on ABC News. There's radio host for the Mike Muse Show on Sirius podcast. There is Sirius Radio. There's the radio host or co-host on Sway 45 in the morning. Multiple hyphens. Good night. I don't even know how to describe you. Tell me about the intersection of Muse as you describe it. What is the work that Mike Muse does?
Yeah, I think my mother has the same challenge too, trying to understand it all. But what I say is I intersect politics. Intersection of Muse is the intersection of politics and pop culture. And so what I do is I get people to see policy through lifestyle, and that's sports, music, film, fashion, and technology. And the thesis of my work, Marcus and John, is that I believe that a lot of individuals don't participate in our democracy because they don't feel like they have a place in it. They don't feel like they have a voice. They always believe that is for them, those, and others who work for some fancy law firm, possibly work in Wall Street or work in academia. And so they feel like it's for them. But what I love having the conversation is to introduce them to how policy is really the agitator of everything that they love. I say, if you love your Jordans or your Nike, there was a trade policy that was established in order for us to trade with China. And that if you were to make these shoes in the US, I'm not making a political statement on this, but it would cost, instead of $150, it may even cost $350, $450, because you have to factor in labor costs. I talk about if you like denim is a commodity. If you like blue jean jackets, blue jeans, it's a commodity. And then also too, during the pandemic, a lot of individuals enjoyed going to Tulum, if you guys remember. That was the hot spot. And so I talk about these ports from JFK to Tulum, Detroit Metro Airport to Tulum, didn't get created just by a construction company coming together. It usually takes 10 years of diplomacy in order to create two different ports of entry between one country and another. And so for you to enjoy Tulum during the pandemic, or you to go to Cabo on spring break, it took 10 years of policy. And so with all these different things are at play, you need to be engaged in the conversation. You need to be engaged in the discourse, because if not, there are people who are going to decide what ports of entry you should go to for your spring break, or God forbid another pandemic happens. There are other people involved who are going to set the prices for the avocado toast that you like, or the upgraded Chipotle. That comes from trade between Mexico and the United States. And so why have others in DC who don't look like you, not of you, don't understand the culture of Nikes or the sneaker culture, being a sneakerhead, determine what the price of your sneakers should be? And so once I enter it from that space, then people begin to latch on. People begin to understand, I do have a voice. And so really at its core, that is the work. And I do it across the different mediums that you mentioned, through television and through radio, and then through other avenues that are participating.
Yeah. I mean, so what you're really uncovering, revealing for folks are all the mechanisms that are at play at a macro level to help them have much more agency, right? To not be a passive player in all this, that they can have more agency because they understand how these things work. It reminds me of that scene from The Devil's Wear Prada, and where one character, she's like, laughing about the silly little skirt
and a wind for it.
Yeah, and she goes, "Do you know like how many things led to the skirt you're wearing right now? This isn't like silly fashion things, but this actually ripples down into your everyday life. And without understanding how intersected these worlds are, you literally are just a passive player in all of it." What's your take on that, John?
Well, Mike, I love it. First thing I got to know, who wears blue jean jackets? Come on.
It's a thing, John. It's a thing.
John, raise his hand, John. Raise his hand. Me, John. You don't have a denim jacket. Are you kidding me? That's the first thing I packed in my carry-on.
So first thing, which really struck me is I love this concept of othering, and I think we could probably dissect that whole avenue of othering as the root of so many problems in society. But the idea of othering in terms of global trade, what you're really saying is kind of peeking behind the curtain into the backstage, because we as everyday citizens are just so oblivious to the 90, 95, 99% of activity which is happening backstage before we can even see the play on the front stage.
Absolutely. That's exactly what has happened. It's to bring down the curtain. John, there's a lot of theories out there that there's 10 white men in cloak and daggers who are making the decisions based on our democracy. And that's actually not the case at all. You think about the local level. Marcus mentioned the micro level and the macro. You mentioned both, Marcus, I believe. But if you look at it from the local level, your city council, for example, your city councils, they have so much say in terms of what happens in your city. But normally for city council members, they only need to raise about maybe $20,000 for their campaign. Now, Marcus and John, put that in perspective of a presidential campaign. A presidential campaign, where if fundraising dollars are needed, they're averaging about $1 billion now. So put that in context. In a local race for a city council person only needs about $20,000. The difference here is not only just the money, but the turnout. Normally for a presidential election cycle, maybe let's say in the city, you would get 30% turnout for a presidential election. When it comes to your local race like a city council, you probably get 5%. So that really translates roughly, I'm just using random numbers here, audience, to maybe 1,000 people voted for that city council person that is now determining when your streets get mowed, what parks get designated as a green park or a dog park or a yoga park, or what gets parked at as a skating park, what park gets determined to have baseball fields, football fields, lacrosse, soccer, right? So we get a yoga park. That city council is really determining the zoning that is going into your city in terms of, should we have a Chipotle? Should we have a Sweet Green? Should we have a McDonald's? What should we put in this area? Or most importantly, should we have none of that? And so that is all determined by 1,000 people. Even to go even more in depth, you think about your school boards. I'm talking to two academics right now. Education is such a hot topic right now, socially, politically. We don't have to get into it. But a lot of these decisions about what books your kid is reading, comes down to possibly a stay-at-home parent who just decided to run for the school board, and they only needed about 100 votes to get in there because people don't really care or think about the school board. But people don't understand that it's a school board that is determining curriculums. It's the school boards that's determining and allocating budgets. And so all the things that we're always complaining about, we have the power to actually make the change in two ways, either to run for elected office or just to vote. And by vote, if you care about what books your kids are reading, if you want your kids to have more James Baldwin books in their libraries, for example, you and grab 5 other parents who also like James Baldwin and just make sure that you elect a school board member who also agrees in your concept and your likes and the value that you see in the literature works of James Baldwin to be taught possibly. And so it really comes down to that level. But the way social media, and I know I'm talking to some social media experts and media experts here, has really created an erosion in our democracy and has really have not allowed for honest discourse. And so that is kind of how I think about it.
What I tell you, I think is particularly dope about the work you do is that while you're able to get into the nuances in the context of the POTUS station on Sirius Radio, on your show, the Mike Muse Show, but you also get to talk to the average listener on Sway 45. People are like, I'm just here for the beats, my guy. Like, I'm just here for the jams. I'm here for the joints. And while I'm listening to fill in the blank artist, fill in the blank rapper, fill in the blank freestyle session, I'm now being educated about these things that surround my life and giving the information. And arguably, I guess I'll sort of imply this, giving the charge to like, hey man, don't just sit around. Like, have some play in all this. Now, the thing is that when I think about someone who does that, I go, oh, they must have studied political science. They must have been really, spent their career in community activism and social building and grassroots mobilizing. How did you get into this space? Now, I know the story. I just want to hear how you're going to tell it.
Yeah, that's such a great question. But I wanted this, if I can go back a little bit to what you mentioned on the Sway in the Morning show in Sirius XM. And the reason why I love that work is to really what you put, Marcus, in terms of you'll get music, you'll get lifestyle, but I call it putting sugar on medicine, right? Like, it tastes good going down, but once it get in you, it actually has the ability to heal you and to make you feel better. And I think that is what's been happening with our audience. And it's been beautiful to see the audience grow as I grow, right? And learning. And I get it, John, I get DMs from individuals saying I voted for the first time. I had one of my most memorable calls, Marcus, was I got a guy who called into the show and he said, Mike, I've been listening for some time now. I finally registered because of you. And it's because of you that I'm sitting in the parking lot going in to possibly cast my ballot. But why should I get out of my car? Right. And this was live on the air. And so I having to talk with him like about that. I think I had another really proud moment just recently on ABC because a large part of my audience is on both the Mike Muse Show and on Sway in the Morning is truck drivers. So truck drivers are the bedrock really of our listenerships. And so oftentimes truck drivers are my North Star. As well as teachers are my North Star who teach public schools from K through 12, because they also too would hit me up and say, I wait to get out of the car until you finish your report so that I can talk with my students about what it is that you're discussing for that day. And I get it. Like, a lot of times these teachers are burdened down with having to create a curriculum, having to be social workers, having to be all the things. And they may not have time to create a political curriculum for them because budgets have cut civics out of the classrooms. So with the North Star being my truck drivers on ABC, we were recently discussing this bill that New York State has taken up that says that in every restaurant that is in a rest stop, that restaurant must be open 7 days a week. Well, we have Chick-fil-A's that are in our restaurant. And as you both know and your audience knows, Chick-fil-A is closed on Sundays. And so the debate was, is this fair to Chick-fil-A? What should we do? And I thought about the North Star in my response. And I said that no, Chick-fil-A should not be allowed to be closed in there because you have truck drivers who are driving. When they pull into a rest stop, they want to know they have options in order to eat. And that Chick-fil-A is taking up that space for another restaurant that could provide that truck driver an option. Why should we give that truck driver one option where there's another stand that is possible? And so it takes the choice out of the truck driver. And so that is a really great example of how the work that I do really informs each other. And so a lot of people think because I am so multi-hyphenated, I'm all over the place. No, that's a perfect example of what I do at 8 a.m. translates to what I do at 12 p.m., translates to what I do at 5 p.m., translates to what I do at 8 p.m. It's literally the same work. It just is in a different office.
Yeah. Same work, different modality. I like that. So actually, school us here for a moment. How do people normally get into the work that you do? I imagine, again, like social work, maybe poli-sci, like how do they get there? What's the normal trajectory?
The normal trajectory is that someone would possibly graduate college, majoring in political science, or some other liberal arts degree, and they will work possibly for a campaign. And let's use a senatorial campaign, or let's use a presidential campaign. And so what they'll do is they'll work for a senatorial campaign or a presidential campaign. They'll knock on doors. They'll do phone calls. They'll do grassroots movements. And then from there, once that candidate wins, then they would typically follow that candidate to Washington, to D.C., to then what's called to work on the Hill. So have a spot working in the chamber of the Senate. If their candidate was in the House of Representatives, to work in the chamber of the House, or to work in the executive branch of the White House unto itself. And then that's kind of is a foray, or they'll work in their candidate's local branch. And so since we're in the state of Michigan right now, the senators have branches in the local cities in the state of Michigan, as well as in DC, so they can work in that too as well. So that is one trajectory. Another trajectory is they'll go to law school, and it'll become what we'll call like policy wonks, right? And they will help shape and craft legislations and bills, like from a legal perspective. And so those are a couple of different ways that people will traditionally get into this space.
John, does that add up for you too?
Yeah, it reminds me of a former colleague whom here at Michigan Ross, his name was C.K. Prahalad. Marcus will remember him. He had this really brilliant idea called the dominant logic. And he argued that one of the problems with a lot of industries is that everybody who works in that industry is brainwashed by the dominant logic. And it seems to me that you have kind of reinforced one of the problems of politics is that you have this dominant logic about pathways into this world. And this podcast is called Breaking Schemas, right? Trying to break out of that dominant logic. And you seem to be a poster child for not following the dominant logic. Can you say a bit more about not being part of that dominant logic?
Yeah, and how you got here?
Yeah, I think that gives me a competitive advantage, John and Marcus, and apps and with the ability to create critical analysis. And the why is because Marcus and I were part of the College of Engineering. So I went to University of Michigan, majored in industrial engineering, and did about 2 to 3 years for, depending on how you add it up, of nuclear chemical research. And with nuclear chemical research, I actually took the research on the road where I actually was able to place third in a regional competition.
Small flex.
Yes. Competition. But I use that example very strategically because you guys know at University of Michigan, we're all about case studies. We're all about working in groups. We're all about like presenting on a weekly basis. And so always having to present your problem sets, maybe on a Friday, to a lecture hall that wanted to see you fail and ask you questions just for the sake of asking you questions. And you're 18, 19, you know it, but you don't really know it enough. And so you're always qualifying and trying to make it happen. And the reason why I use the nuclear chemical research is because when I went on to do these national competitions, I was in front of judges who weren't that familiar with nuclear chemistry. And so I had to find a way to present this material and this subject in a way that reflected the work, but also too was able to translate it into spaces to which they could understand the nuance of the work. And so when I go on to talk about, healthcare or education, where I can get asked a question on the spot and I'm able to really unpack it, is because of that critical thinking that the College of Engineering prepared me for. And it's also, too, the critical thinking that my research prepared me for. And what's really so special, I love talking about special moments, John, is that there was a few years back, we were, as a nation, looking at the nuclear treaty with Iran. And what was so special about that was here I am on this hip hop morning show, and here I am talking about the nuclear chemistry aspect of this treaty and of this deal, and why the deal is a really good deal because of my background and knowledge of nuclear chemistry. So I was able to unpack the chemistry aspect of it, but then I was also able to capture the supply chain aspect of it by being an engineer, because the crux of the deal was supply chain. And so having to be able to talk about that to a hip hop audience, but having the ability to be able to translate it so it's palatable because of my research, critical thinking, makes me unique in that way. And because Marcus and I started a record label, I got introduced to lifestyle very early on in the music business. And so in the music business, when Marcus and I were doing it, it looks different now. But at the time, music really shaped culture like no other. Think about it in terms of music was like the TikTok. Music was the Instagram. Music was the Facebook. It really drove culture. And so as a result, I was at the fashion shows, chilling with Marc Jacobs, Madonna, like all these people.
Flex.
Really understanding lifestyle. And so when you understand lifestyle and you're at the precipice of it, and Marcus and I created like good marketing campaigns, and we went on tour. So if you understand lifestyle the way that we did, that means you understand people, right? And you understand movements, which is why Marcus is a bestseller with his new book, because he understands people and movement and culture. And so you put it all together, you combine culture, understanding people, having a lived lifestyle, but then with the technical background that I have, you put all those together. That's what makes me so uniquely qualified to be in the space and position I'm in.
I mean, John, we see this. We saw this in an earlier conversation. These things that seem totally disparate coming together to make the alchemy of something very special, right? It comes with this idea called bricolage, Mike. That's a guy named Levi Strauss, sociologist, talked about this idea of creating new things by bringing things together that normally have nothing to do with each other to come together to create something unique. And Mike, you are a testament of that, right? As I know you, the only thing I knew about you that you knew about politics was doing Boy State when you were in high school, right? And then here's a guy who's like, I'm gonna be an engineer, focused on industrial, but doing work in nuclear chemical work, and then goes into the music industry, and then somehow or another says, I'm gonna work for this little junior senator in Illinois who has the audacity to run for president, and he's black, by the way, guy named Barack Obama, and works for that campaign, being sort of not of that world, but having a way of seeing the world through a rigorous sort of analytical lens that is engineering, learning how to communicate really complicated ideas, complex ideas, so that people who aren't familiar with the space can better understand it. Understanding how the vehicle of culture is so influential to humanity, pull those things together to operate in a space they don't know very well. Good night. That's bricolage at its finest. What do you say that, John?
And you know what else is really key here? And it's such a simple and perhaps obvious idea, although things are only obvious when somebody points them out to you. One of my friends, Marcus Collins, quotes that all the time. Knowing your audience. Right, Mike, you have a particular message, you have a particular communication goal, but here at the Ross School of Business, all communication courses start with the same simple idea: know your audience. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to change minds among a certain cultural demographic group out there, and they are hip hop fans, where are you going to be? Right? You're not going to be on NPR or PBS Evening News. You're going to be on a morning show. I mean, that's just such a simple and obvious idea, but a lot of people don't follow it.
Mm-hmm. I just hope that this is being recorded because I cannot wait to send this out to the world and say, this is what I do, and these are my publicists, and this is my reps, and these are my professors. I can come on this show any day of the week because, like, my self-esteem is like up.
And right, it should be. It should be.
We'll send you the invoice, Mike. Look for the invoice in the mail. The invoice is coming.
Yeah, thank you. But John, you're right. The idea of knowing your audience. And I think that is a challenge that we see in politics today. And I'm talking to two marketing geniuses here and advertising geniuses, so you guys would know this little world better than I would. But when I think about politics right now, these politicians, they go on these same platforms and expecting different results every time to reach an audience that doesn't even are not on these platforms. And I always find it so laughable. And then when they get someone who's out of college who are on their team who think they should be on this latest podcast or this latest TikTok or this latest other show, and they're so out of touch that it doesn't translate. It actually hurts their brand and actually hurts democracy. Because just because, let's say someone who sells tire, who's a big tire influencer on TikTok, right? Maybe has like 2 million followers on TikTok, but his work is about tires. You shouldn't use that person to come to your campaign to then talk about education, right? Like they're not an authority on that. But for far too often, we see politicians doing exactly that, trying to attract an audience. And so for me, it's all about knowing your audience and knowing, all right, who is this audience and how can I deliver them the same message that will gravitate towards them, but without changing anything. I'm very anti that narrative of like dumbing things down or making things overly simplified. I don't do that. I always believe that the audience can rise to the occasion. It's just a matter of the particular word choice, right? And how you say it. And so I will say the same mess on the morning show as well. I'll say on my own show, but also too on Good Morning America. I'm saying the same thing, but I do recognize that the audience that I'm in, but then also to understand our segments can only be 2 minutes and 30 seconds up to 4 minutes. Yeah. And so like, how then do I restructure it based upon time and time intervals, but then also to understand the audience, but then understanding how can I hook them in? So I had this segment now, Good Morning America, called Monday Morning Quarterback with Mike Muse. And so just to give you guys examples of how it's the same thing, just presented differently in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, one conversation was about looking at the college football playoffs at the time before everything got finalized. And I saw that we had Michigan, we had Ohio, we had Florida, and we had Georgia in the top 4. And I said, what do all these things have in common? These are key battleground states that are coming up in our election in 2024, which the bedrock of this election will be the youth vote and the college vote, right? So bringing in all these things, and that's something I would say on the morning show, right? But in the morning hip hop show, but then bring it into a 2 minute, 30 seconds, knowing I need to have graphics, it needs to look really cool, quick, right? Gotta have some fun with the football, right? But it's also to education. We go and talk about the economy and economics. And so all these things that we talk about is just knowing your audience, but without changing the thesis. It's the exact same thesis that I have. I think you call it Marcus. I'm learning. I'm taking notes too, class. I feel like I picked up some words that I've never used before. So I'm using modality, Levi Strauss. I think Levi jeans. I'm not quite for sure, but I'm with it. You know what I mean? Like,
that football reference is actually quite brilliant. I think it goes back to your earlier point, right? Like the thesis stays the same. The work is the work, right? You are driven by a conviction, right? You are driven by a North Star, as it were, that guides the work you do in all the many ways that it manifests. And as you talk about sort of the traditional way things are done, it feels like there's a traditional way things are communicated to a group of people that are traditionally spoken to, which means that there's a group of people who are disenfranchised, who are not a part of the discourse, and therefore feel like they don't have any role to play in this at all. And therefore they are systematically subjected to being passive, which goes back to the original point about helping them gain some agency. And as I hear you talk, and John, I love for you to sort of underscore this if you agree, that I hear like what you're using is agency as a disruptor. It's about providing people agency by making them aware, by speaking in ways that they can understand, but still maintain some dignity, right? Speaking in ways that are digestible yet accurate to the thing, so you don't dumb it down, right? But you ensure that it has all the texture and nuance that it needs, but it's still able to be digested. This idea of agency makes you very, very unique in regards to what you do, which is why you get text messages and emails. And by the way, I get text messages about you too. Like, just love Mike's show. He always says it in a way that I could just understand it. And because of that, people feel like they can do something. John, does that, like, am I barking up the right tree here?
I think you're spot on here. A couple of things which come to mind. The analogy which I sometimes like to use, this modalities, which you said, Marcus, I think Mike is singing the same melody, but in a different key.
Mm-hmm.
Right? To bring it full circle back to music.
I see what you did there, John. I see what you did there. That was clever. I see what you did there.
And Levi Strauss, we could also talk about jean jackets again if you want. Bring it
so
full circle.
Right. Okay, keep going. Okay.
You know, we're all three in the same business. We're educators, right? Our classrooms might be different, right? The lesson plans are slightly different because you got to deliver your lesson in 2.5 minutes to 4 minutes, whereas we might have 90-minute sessions. But at the end of the day, we're in the same business. We are educating. Marcus and I are educating for agency in the world of careers, if you will, right? Yeah. We're trying to educate these students so that they have agency over their lives. And you are educating people so that they have agency in their lives, but in a political context. We're in the same business, my friend.
We are, and I can do tons of jokes, but in the interest of keeping us linear and keep us on track, again, self-esteem is up. I love that I sit in a different key. But I love that you guys zeroed in on agency. And that is always the hope and the outcome in the work that I do. I have a simple prayer. I'm not going to say what my prayer is. That's just for me and God. But part of that prayer is education.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of me. And if you notice, gentlemen, I didn't talk about partisan. I talked policy, but I didn't talk partisan.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about getting people to understand their agency, having agency, because now they actually understand the policy. Now it's up to them to determine how is it they use that agency and in what ways do they use it? Do they use their agency to donate to a campaign? Do they use their agency to volunteer? Do they use their agency now to sign up? Do they use their agency to vote? And then, like, who do they vote for, right? And so the example that I did recently, I just coming off tour, a speaking tour with Chevrolet, and part of it was I curated this Black Futures conversation about AI and technology and all the bells and whistles you guys can imagine what that was about. But I had an individual there that was from Meta. But I intentionally, one would think would have a computer science major or engineer. No. What I did was, it was college campuses. I had an individual who worked in the policy department of Meta. And I wanted those college students to understand, to what the point of what you guys are working on in this podcast about disruption, non-traditional, breaking the mold, is one can major in sociology and work for a place like Meta, right? Because we need sociology majors to really understand society, to help work with teams, to really understand how society is engaging with the product, right? We need political science majors who are majoring in college to go work for Metas and the Googles of the world, to really understand and shape tech policy to prepare it for these candidates and these politicians who don't know about tech policy. I'm not knocking anybody, but so this is kind of the work that you guys are doing. For me, that is the agency that I'm always trying to impart is I get it. We can have a soapbox. I love when people tweet things and all the things and get them riled up in emotion, but I don't like that. But at some point, we have to advance the conversation to a solution, right? And the solution has to come from one's own agency and knowing that you can have a part in our democracy.
John, what's your take?
Mike, I love what you're saying about liberal arts students can go into STEM fields, and policy people can go into tech. Unfortunately, I think the narrative these days is that liberal arts students have no careers after they graduate, right? That there are these these pathways that if you want to be in business, you have to have a BBA. If you want to be an engineer or tech, you got to have a computer science tech degree. So I love what you're saying. And I love that you got examples of what I would say enlightened companies like Meta hiring people from all different backgrounds, that the power in the diversity, right? Diversity, not just in our traditional ways of thinking about diversity, but diversity of thought, diversity in backgrounds, which ultimately will lead to better solutions.
I mean, this is the irony here. I guess not ironic. I guess it's coincidental that all three of us are engineers. In fact, John was electrical engineering.
Oh, snap. What up, John?
The difficult one, not the cheesy ones that you did.
Are you done?
Yeah.
He always goes in on materials. Always.
Marcus, as we like to say to people like John, well, we sign your checks, young man. Yeah. Keep toying with your circuit breakers. That's super cute.
But John, to your point, here we are. We started in the same kind of home as engineers, but took engineering as a way of analyzing or interrogating the world, i.e., as engineers, we're taught to apply logic to problem solving. Like that's what I've always known the definition of engineering to be. But I think about it a little bit more concretely, that we analyze the world by looking at the underlying physics that govern how things work. Right? Look at everything is made up of systems, understanding the systems. And if we understand the systems, then we can start to impact them. We can leverage the mechanisms inside the system and actually change it. John, you have done this brilliantly over your career as an educator and as a marketer, right? As a songwriter, I always thought about what are the chord changes. Those are the systems that I thought about. And as a marketer, and now on the academic side, I'm always thinking about what are the underlying physics of humanity, like the cultural systems that guide what we do. Mike, what you have done in the world of politics are what are the micro and macro systems that are at play that impact everything from the rest stop on the side of the road for truck drivers to what books we end up reading in our schools. And I think that, like, not to sort of oversell engineering, but I think that that's really sort of where the heart of things are, that if we leverage our undergraduate studies as a way to learn how to learn how to see the world and interrogate the world and make meaning of the world, then we could take those skills and go elsewhere. Now, John, if you got something spicy to say about materials engineering, you and I go fight.
Nope. I was going to agree with you. And, another thing which all three of us have in common, we were all performers.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that this ability to interrogate the world, as you said, the underlying physics, the systems, the structures of things, combined with our, natural God-given talents in performing or our learned talents in performing, has enabled us to break into the world of education in our own particular ways.
Yeah. Mike used to play a mean saxophone back in the day.
Yeah. All City Jazz Band, baby. And drum major from our marching band. Shout out to Lansing, everybody.
Flex.
But yes, to exactly what you guys were saying. In particular, John, the last part you made about the performance aspect of it, I think that's part of what you gentlemen have been talking about too, as well, is about like knowing your audience, right? Like this stuff doesn't have to be boring, right? And things don't have to be like esoteric. And I think people in the political space and the academic space, you guys love talking to each other too as well over coffee, right? And you love writing your white papers, right? Like you love examining case studies.
John
right?
went to Cambridge, so he's really about that for sure.
And I hate when people say they went to Cambridge. I'm like, just say with your chest. You know what I mean? Right? And politicians love talking with themselves. They love doing things in DC. They love that beltway speak, right? And but I think those of us who understand the act of performance understands that this doesn't have to be boring. And I think it's because all three of us love what we do so much. It's fun for us. And then so we can make it fun for other people too as well. To use a neutral example, I never was a fan of history ever. And it wasn't so recently. And when I mean recent, was recently. I had the pleasure of meeting this retired history professor from West Point. and he wore a hearing aid in both ears. And so he was very loud. And so he couldn't really understand like just how loud he was. And so he didn't care. And the more drinks that he had, the louder he would get, and he couldn't modulate his own self. And the stories he would tell over history would get more colorful and colorful, and he would turn red, and he's loud in the restaurant. And I ate it up because I'm like, to what you and Marcus are talking about, he was performing. And I was like, this is so fascinating. But he wasn't being performative in a way that was being hyperbolic, or in a way that was being exaggerating tales, or using different words to draw me in. It was just, you could tell he loved it. And he was so colorful with it. And from there, I was like, I wish I had more history professors and teachers like him, because I probably would have loved history so much early. And so now I feel like I'm catching up in other ways, because now I love history, right? But it took somebody to unlock that love, but it took somebody to perform. And so I think that's exactly what you guys are mentioning. I don't know if you guys are watching The Gilded Age right now. It's like pure history. It's beautiful.
I see another hyphen in your future, my friend, Professor Mike Muse. I see it. I'm claiming it. I'm putting it in the world.
I'm not as smart as
oh, please. So look,
I like
you've been so gracious.
Champagne in my coffee mug. I like a little champagne in my coffee mug. I don't.
Hey, in Cambridge, they drink sherry, so it's all good.
That is true.
Yeah. Mike, you've been so gracious with your time, man. We're so thankful for you being as vulnerable as you've been, and really sort of like taking off the veneer of how you present yourself to understand the intentional decisions that you made. And so I want to ask two more questions of you, quick questions of you before we let you go. Get out of your hair here. What was the worst advice you were given as you were navigating your career? What was the worst advice you were given?
Find your passion.
Oh, please unpack that for me.
I hate it. I think the reason why so many young people right now are depressed and having so much emotional anxiety is because they're on this whirlwind of trying to find their passion. In society, if we don't find our passion, we won't be happy. And so for me, I never had a passion, right? And I've discovered it now, but before I get to the discovery aspect of it, you know, I enjoyed music, right? But like, I didn't have vocals like Marcus. I didn't have the creativity skills to produce like Marcus. And so I knew my limitations. I wasn't going to do this. Like, I can't dance. I was never going to like Juilliard, right? I can't act.
Dance,
yeah, but you know, I couldn't do an 8 count. Yeah, at a nightclub, you know, all good, right? And so like, I didn't have the desire to be a teacher or a police officer or a doctor. And I was like, what am I? Who am I? What do I want to be? And I felt really bad about that. But it was just following my curiosity and saying yes to things that led me to what my passion is, which is intersecting politics and pop culture. If you just give me politics, I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to enjoy it. If you just give me culture, I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm not going to be happy. I have to be intersecting it at the same time in order to make me happy. And so from there, that is how I found, I guess, my passion. But it was really just following my curiosity. And I feel like we don't tell our students and our youth and our children, just follow your curiosity, and eventually you'll find the thing that works for you. And so that's for me.
I like that a lot. And it's interesting, the word passion, because colloquially, we talk about passion like something that you're interested in, something that you really care about, that you're fired up about. But passion actually comes from the religious text, and passion actually means suffer, i.e., the passion of the Christ, like for what you're willing to suffer. So I think that if we reframe passion to what are you willing to like really go through the trenches on, like that's just how convicted you are about it. That's what you should focus on. Not the thing that like lights you up in the morning, but the thing that keeps you up at night, right? And it's
I know we can't.
Helping people, I think, is really what you're on. Go for it.
I know we can't talk all day, but I just had like a light bulb, an epiphany to this idea about passion and suffering, because speaking of being vulnerable, and I'm very open about this story too as well. And Marcus has known me for a while. John, you're getting to know me. And so, you know, through my social media, it looks like I'm living the life, right? And I am. I want to be very clear. I am, right? I'm having a ball. But suffering, in order to get to where I am right now, it took me living on dollar slices of pizza,
Yep.
I did lecture or guest lecture or do speaking engagements, but I did it for free. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I couldn't get people to pay me for nothing. Everyone now is multi-hyphenate. Everyone now says we're intersection politics and pop culture, but I did it first. There's a TED Talk to prove it.
That's right.
But Marcus literally, and John, Marcus knows this, I would get these same questions. One, what is this intersection of politics and pop culture? What is that? Is that a job? Can you find work with that? And then the most disrespectful, audacious question is, did you get paid for that? Do you get paid for that? And then how much do you get paid for that? And so for me, I had to suffer, right? And stick with it and stay the course. Had people laughing at me, joking behind my back, talking about me. I'm crazy. I need to get a real job. I need to do some real things. I need to be buying a house right now, back in the day, right? All these things, but I stayed the course. And what you're saying, Marcus, I in this analogy, I suffered, right? But in suffering for the things that just got me out of bed every morning has led me to now to have this career where I have this agency to help other people have agencies. And I'm on a talking with you fine gentlemen right now. So that is really the heart of that. It's beautiful, Marcus. I just had to highlight that.
Amen. Amen. Okay, last question for you. What is the advice you'd give to future leaders who are looking to disrupt their career, disrupt their industry, or even disrupt the industry that you're in? What advice would you give them?
Be a studier of your industry. I think that people want to jump in to be a disruptor, but don't know who they are in relationship to that sector.
Yeah.
Right? Because not everyone who is a lawyer is the exact same lawyer, right? And, there's different types of lawyers. There's corporate law, there's merger acquisitions, there's defense, there's litigators, but then they work in different sectors. You want to go big law firm, mid-size, you want to have a small firm, do you want to do pro bono work, public defender, right? And then who do you show up for? What clients do you take on, right? So that's just a really easy example to say, who are you? Find out who you are in this space. And then once you find out who you are in this relationship, be a studier of this.
Yeah.
It is really... it will be really hard for someone to ask me a political question that I'm just not aware of. It'll be really hard for someone to ask me a cultural question that I just couldn't answer.
Yeah.
And that's because I get up in the morning reading, learning, watching, right? And so that for me allows me the confidence to go out on the shows, on the television, and this and that, knowing I'm so well prepared that it'll be hard to stump me. And I think that's what helps me become a disruptor, is because I'm so well prepared. Yeah. But for so many often, people just want to jump in and be disruptor for disruptor's sake and say they're disruptor and have a disruptor hashtag and then have a t-shirt and have a great website, right? They want to go on tour and talk and do all the things, write a book that's like 10 pages thick. And so
that's fired.
Hey, but that's the difference with you, Marcus. Like, you wrote this incredible book that has a lot of pages, but it was well researched. It was well supported. You did the research, you did the work, you studied this, right? In your PhD. And that's why you're having this success you're having. And I know there's so many other authors out there who just wanted to write a book, to get a brand, to have a talk with Young Jeezy one day, right? But they wrote 10 pages. And what are you saying? Right? Like you're saying,
just to like co-sign everything you just said, I feel like the thing that has been like one of the cheat codes of my career is just to stay in student posture always. Like, and like I always find myself being the dumbest person in the room, and I like that because I always learn. I mean, it's a reason why my business partner is you. I learned from you. And my academic partner is John. I learned from John, right? This room is no different than any other room. I'm always the dumbest person. That way I'm always learning. It's the way you keep the knife sharp. You got to stay in student posture.
Yeah.
John, so put a bow on this for us, John. What's your calculus on this?
we don't like to be too reductionist because people are so nuanced. But for the podcast called Breaking Schemas, we want to boil it down to a single lesson. I think the lesson really today with Mike was about agency, right? Agency. But I loved the last point, which was you can have agency, but if you're not an expert in the field in which you're trying to disrupt, the agency means nothing.
Hey now.
So Mike, just brilliant insight there. Learning mode, constantly being a student so that you can be an expert, thereby allowing you to exercise your agency.
So well said, John. Mike, thank you so very much, brother. I mean, I feel like I know we could have talked for hours and hours on end, but just super grateful, so proud of all you've accomplished. You make us all proud to be Michigan Wolverines, man. So thank you so very much.
Man, thank you both, Marcus and John, for having me. You guys are brilliant at what you do. Audience, what you didn't hear was before we came on, I told Marcus and John I was nervous and that I typically don't do interviews. And it's because people are not prepared to really understand the work that I do. But they haven't done the work to unpack it, and they haven't done the work to contextualize it, and to put it in this really great critical space. And so this is why I don't do interviews, for that reason. But you two were a dream interview. These questions were just great. It really spoke to the person I am, but really it spoke to the work that I do. But that took you guys having to go a little bit deeper than just looking at my Instagram. And
we're fans, brother. We're fans.
So just thank you for the critical discourse. I really, really appreciate it. You guys are brilliant.
A final word from me, my friends. All three of my children attended state. So my two boys did boys state, and my daughter did girls state, and she went to Girls Nation. So,
John, Mike was governor. He was governor of Boys State.
Look at.
Yes, I did the Nation, John. That's so crazy.
These two guys here with me, what they've accomplished in their lives, I'm so hopeful that my kids can be half as successful as you two.
John, how did we find you? Marcus, how'd you find this John guy? Like, that's it.
This is the other secret of my career. Stay in student posture, and you acquire good people when you find them.
Yes.
John was my professor in the MBA program, and I was like, oh, this guy.
He's amazing. Come on in. I'm kind of obsessed right now. So, an audience, when you look at this on video, we're all bald. The circles and connections keep going. We could be here all day, folks. I'm here all day.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much.
Grass does not grow on a busy street, Mike.
Yeah. Oh, I like it.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Breaking Schemas. This has been a special one for me. Appreciate you all. See you soon. Go Blue.
Go Blue.
Go Blue.